Hello crafty friends, and welcome to this not just Christmas card video. Today I'm going to make a Christmas card for you, but I'm also going to show you some other cards that I make using the same design, techniques, ideas, tools, supplies, that kind of thing. So if you want to see the non-Christmas cards, then stick around to the end of the video. So I've got some star dies here, an embossing ink pen, a bit of scrap paper, and I'm going to emboss some stars on here in gold, but I'm going to do it by drawing through a stencil that I make with some scrap paper and my dies. So I'm going to arrange my dies where I want them on here. So I want to keep my little stars up here towards the top. Actually, we might jiggle them around a little bit, something like that. If you've already got a star stencil, you could use that, but I'm going to cut my own today. So we have here a piece of watercolour paper, as I think I said. I'm going to dust it with corn flour because I want to heat emboss on it, and I want to get rid of any greasy fingerprints or moisture or static. And these are the same size, so I can just knock them together like that. And I'm going to take the large bullet tip on this writer pen and go around the inside of my stencil. If you've got star outline stamps in the appropriate size for your card, then you could do stamping with embossing ink. You could freehand the stars if you wanted to. And now I'm going to dip that in gold embossing powder. Looks pretty good. And now I'll heat that with my heat tool. So that's cooled down nicely. And I'm going to take the thin end now of the embossing pen and draw some strings all the way to the top of my card, using my T-square ruler to get them straight. And I'm going to put a little bow on the top of each one. Again, if you've got stamps that would work for this, you could use those with embossing ink. So I'm going to do some watercolouring now, and I'm going to use Distress Oxides to do that. So I'll put a little bit of each one on my mat. I've got peacock feathers, wilted violet and chipped sapphire. And I'm going to start with some clean water. Well, I'm just going to brush over the whole of the top part of the card. I'm going to start with the chipped sapphire and go around the stars. The ink will go wherever there's already water, which is why I put water over the whole thing, but the gold embossing will act like a bit of a barrier and stop it going in the stars. It's a very warm day today, so this is going to dry quite quickly, so I'm working quite quickly. I can always spritz it with a bit of water again. I don't want to colour the whole of the front of the card, and I want to fade the colour out towards the edges of this area. So I'm going to come in with some water and really make this area dilute so that the purple and the rest of the colours fade out. A little bit more around this star, I think. Okay, and now I'm going to go in with some wilted violet, and that will mix and mingle around the stars. That in there, just lift that out, that's fine. And again, I'm going to keep this edge wet so that it fades out rather than has any kind of harsh line. I'm going to try and lift this colour here that went in this star. There's a slight purpley bit there, but I think we're just going to have to live with that. But that's okay, it's a handmade card. And now for some peacock feathers. So we'll just drop a bit of that in here and there. And let it mix and mingle with the other colours. So now I'm just going to tilt that around a bit, and that'll let the colours move and sort of run into each other and spread across the page, card front. And I'm going to hold it up away from myself to see if I think I need any extra colour anywhere. I'll turn it this way up so that any excess water will run down to the bottom, and I'll be able to kind of dab it off. I can run a bit of dry paper towel along the bottom and it will pick up any drips of water, but I think that's looking pretty much how I want it. At least that's the first layer. So I'm going to just dry this with my hairdryer, being careful not to remelt the embossing powder. So I'm going to put a second layer over the top, and I'm going to run water around and about the place so that my inks have got somewhere to go when I put them down. But I'm not going to let the colour spread out as far as it did. So I want it's like a second layer of the same. Some of these distress oxides will reactivate, some will stain the paper a bit more. Oops, I've done that splodge again. You sort of want to work quickly so you don't get any harsh lines. You don't want to work so quick that you mess it up. Right, so now some more purple. I'm going to concentrate all my colours around the stars now, so the stars really pop. And I can bring in a wet brush when I start to see harsh lines forming. Just reactivate the ink. You can add a bit more to mask it. Just keep working quickly with that second layer. I'm keeping the darkness concentrated around this portion where the stars are. And that just creates a bit more intensity in that area. So we've got some harsh lines up here forming. Same down here, just keep coming in with extra water. So I think that'll do. I'm going to dry that again. And now I'm going to put the stars that I die cut back over my stars to act as masks, because I want to do some splattering, but I don't want the splattering going on the stars. I need to try and track down the little star. It's wafted off somewhere. So I've got my 3 empty stars, or I will have when I can get my fingers and thumbs working. Got these covered up, and I'm going to pick up the ink that's left on my palette with a wet paintbrush and use that to spatter. This can also be used to break up any harsh lines that have formed that you don't want. You can concentrate your spatters in that area, and that will break up the harsh lines with a little bit of violet as well. And then we can take those off and dry that. And now for the stars. I'm going to take some of this Cosmic Shimmer. Oop, far too much. Don't need that much. Don't need nearly that much. It's Cosmic Shimmer Pixie Powder White Pearl Mixer. And add some water to it, only a little bit. And then paint it in here. Probably won't be able to see this on video, but I'll do some tilting and I'll take photos at the end so you can see the shimmer and shine. I'm just painting on the inside of the embossing to make the card shimmery. And again, the embossing is acting as a resist and forcing the shimmery water stay within the star. So I'm going to dry that again. Now I'm going to take some more and a nice wet paintbrush and spatter some on. It doesn't obviously matter if it goes in the stars because it's the same colour as the stars now, so I don't need to mask those off. So we're going to have some shimmery splatter too, and if I dry that quickly enough it won't tint with the colour of the ink underneath. So I hope that the camera's picking that up, but there is plenty of shimmer and shine on this Christmas card now. Now I'm going to cut a panel out of this. I'm going to use my usual stitched rectangle die to do that. My card blank is 4 inches by 5.5 inches, and this is going to go on here like this, but I want to give it a darker border, so I'm going to colour around the edges with, I think, the chipped sapphire. So I've got my sponge dauber. I've masked off the middle of the card so I don't get it on the back. I'm going to try and hold this still so I don't smear the card around in the ink on the paper beneath. I think this is another one of my older ink pads that needs re-inking. 6 years old and never been re-inked. I think it's done very well. Take the mask off and should have a nice crisp line there down the middle, which I do. Now I'll put some tape runner on the back and get this stuck on the card. So while the ink is still wet underneath, the tape runner might not grab the card blank very well, so I'm giving it a really good press down. Might just put something heavy on it in a minute. For my sentiment, I've chosen a small typewriter font stamp that says "So Loved," because sometimes it's not appropriate to put Merry Christmas or Happy Christmas or Celebrate on a Christmas card. You know, depending on what your recipient has been through that year, it might not be something that they want to do, celebrate Christmas. But sending them a "So Loved" card at that time of year, I think, can be a nice thing. So I've got that there, and I'm going to stamp it here, snuggled in amongst the stars, and I'm going to do it in gold again. You could obviously do this at the start of the process when you do the other heat embossing, but I hadn't thought of it at that point. I don't want to dip the whole card in, so I'm just going to take a little bit and tap it over there and then flip it over, and there we go. It says "So Loved." I think that's readable and a little bit subtle, so that's nice. Right, that's that card done. Do stick around for a couple more minutes and I'll show you some more cards that I've made with this idea. Right, I'm back and I have a bunch of other cards that I've made using this kind of technique. It's been a few days since I made them. I've been up and down to London visiting my mum in hospital, so hopefully I can remember how I made them. So for card number 1, I used mixed media paper to create the panel, and that's the same as I used on all of these. Next, I used this cloud stencil and the embossing pen to draw the cloud shapes, heat emboss them in gold, and then I used tumbled glass distress oxide to colour the sky behind the clouds. And I just did a very diffuse wash. Once that was dry, I coloured in the clouds with that Cosmic Shimmer Pixie Powder in White Pearl Mixer, and I added some Morning Dew Nouveau drops around just for a little bit of something in the background. And for, I think, most of the rest of these cards, I've used some Happy Birthday type stamps, heat embossed them in gold and then die cut them out with their coordinating die and added them on a little bit of craft foam to bring in a bit of dimension. Card number 2, I used this stencil to draw some circles with the embossing pen. Again, I coloured it in with the white pearl mixer. The Distress Oxides, I believe I used Salty Ocean and Peacock Feathers. And I stamped this circle, Happy Birthday to You, heat embossed it and then cut it out with scissors because I didn't have exactly the right size die. This was a recent find at a charity shop and I thought they would make really nice little additions to my cards. I did add some white Nouveau drops and these have absorbed in places some of the colour, so they tone in nicely. For this card, card number 3, I used hexagons, this stencil. And I clustered everything down in the bottom left corner, overlapped some of the hexagons. I used bundled sage Distress Oxide, and it looks like I've used lots of colours here because you've got a variety of greens, but it is just bundled sage. So these are all the different colours in that ink, sort of spreading out as they diffuse through the water. Another stamped, embossed and die cut sentiment, and some white Nouveau drops which have coloured with the bundled sage. Oh, and I have been using one of the colours from the background to go around the edge of the card blank. On the cloud one, I thought it didn't need anything else. I felt it needed to be light and airy, so I left that white. But this one I did peacock feathers around the edge, this one bundled sage. For this card, I didn't use a stencil, I just drew the hearts freehand with the embossing pen and then used picked raspberry for the background and the pixie powder inside the hearts. And again, I didn't put any colour around the outside. I wanted this one to be light and airy and floaty, so it's got a white border around it, and gold Nouveau drops to bring in a bit of energy and something scattered around and some extra shimmer and shine and dimension. This is just a bit of an abstract pattern. I used this stencil and just drew a line of these wibbly wobbly blobs. And I think this is peacock feathers again, with peacock feathers around the outside and some white Nouveau drops that are slightly peacock feathery now. And another abstracty pattern. This one is a kind of tile pattern, I think. So that's the stencil that I used, and again peacock feathers and Salty Ocean, I think, and I put peacock feathers around the outside. With these white Nouveau drops, I didn't put the drops straight on the card. I put them on some plastic and left them to set on plastic. And when you do that, when they are completely hard, you can peel them off and then glue them on, and then they won't absorb the colour of the ink underneath. So these have stayed quite white. And for this next card, I used this butterfly stencil. I coloured the inside bits with the Cosmic Shimmer White Pearl Mixer and then used picked raspberry again to create this diffuse background. I also used picked raspberry around the edges. And for my sentiment, I die cut a halo out of, I think it was a scrap of white card, and then I heat embossed that a couple of times with the gold, the same gold as this, so that it matched. I used this square stencil to create these little presents, so I drew around or inside the stencil and then free-handed some ribbon on the top, some little bows, and then I stamped, heat embossed and die cut this teeny tiny Happy Birthday. I didn't colour this, the inside, with the Cosmic Shimmer. I just left it as it was, but I did spatter on some Cosmic Shimmer so there's more sparkle there. And I think I used scattered straw and picked raspberry for the colours in the background and picked raspberry around the outside. I think this next card might be one of my favourites in this batch. I used this mandala stencil. I think it's a Stampin' Up. These dark grey ones I think are Stampin' Up stencils, but they were a charity shop find. And again, just drew around the inside of the stencil, heat embossed, scattered straw and picked raspberry again, I think, picked raspberry around the outside, and it's your day. And for my last card, I pulled out the bundled sage again and used this chevron stencil, kept all that up there, and then popped the heat embossed sentiment down the bottom. and a popped bundled sage around the outside. So there we have 11 cards made using a kind of stenciling technique with embossing. I hope you've enjoyed the video and it's given you some ideas of things you can do with the supplies that you have to hand. If it has, please do let me know in the comments. Let me know which one of these designs you might like to have a go at. And if you want to see more from me, do subscribe and ring the notification bell. And I'll see you back here tomorrow for my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.